Following the loss over the weekend that snapped the 10-game winning streak, Louisville bounced back on the road at Boston College and got back in the win column.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this post-game recap edition of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Following the loss over the weekend to Georgia Tech that snapped the Cardinals' 10-game winning streak, Louisville bounced back with a win over Boston College on the road on Wednesday, 84-58, the final score from Chestnut Hill. Louisville led for the vast majority of the game, had a double-digit lead at halftime, and used a strong second-half surge to push this game out of reach, and they had to do so without star point guard Chucky Hepburn, who exited the game early in the second half due to injury. We'll discuss the second half surge. We'll give updates on Chucky Hepburn's status and also sort of discuss some of the lingering issues from the past couple of games for the Cardinals. Main thing here, however, is that Louisville is back in the win column. I thought it was kind of obvious but witty for the commentating crew to say that, you can't start another win streak without winning the first game. And I'm like, obviously, but I'm like, yeah, it's kind of neat how that was said. But Louisville back in the win column now, 17-6 on the season, 10-2 in conference play. The win ties them with Clemson. Once again, the Tigers lost on Tuesday night to none other than the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. It takes a little bit of the sting of that loss away. No pun intended, or maybe pun intended. Defeating Clemson at Little John Arena in triple overtime. It was one of the better ACC games this season. But nonetheless, we're not here to talk about that contest. Here to talk about Louisville getting back in the win column. We discussed last episode and explained that Louisville just could not lose against Boston College and or Miami. And they're 50% of the way there. And it's not just limited to these two games, but these two specifically, the lowest teams in the net in the ACC, and by far the worst Power 4 teams in the net, both ranked just outside of the top 200. So you saw how the Georgia Tech loss, now a quad 2 game, how that affected Louisville's ranking. That or a loss to one of these two teams would be disastrous. And February is all about eliminating bad losses. So it wasn't pretty, but a win is a win. And I know that you sit here looking at a 26-point win and you're saying, well, it wasn't pretty. What else could you ask for? And I think that it's necessary to not overlook that Louisville won by 26 points, but I think you're justified in suggesting that there are some things that lingered in the first half from the Georgia Tech game, from the second half of the Wake game, that probably does need some correction moving forward, and you're able to get away with it because you played one of the worst teams in the conference. So two things can be true at one time, and that is that there are some things to work on, and it wasn't pretty, but also applaud the team for winning this game 84-58. And like I mentioned, a lot of this came behind a second half surge without Chucky Hepburn. Chucky Hepburn went out of the game just before the 15-minute mark in the second half, which was classified as a lower body injury. Now, it looked like an injury to the groin area, and we'll discuss a little bit more about that when we talk about the second half surge in the second segment. But it was really nice to see Louisville, who has struggled mightily without Chucky Hepburn in the game, prove that they still can be serviceable on the offensive end. Terrence Edwards did a really good job at stepping in at point guard. It wasn't pretty. He made some turnovers, some decisions that he'll obviously want back. But for the most part, he did what he needed to do. Javon Hadley was incredible. And let me just say this about Javon Hadley. He's been overshadowed this year by Edwards and Chucky and Rain at different times. But there is a real argument to be made that Hadley is the Cardinals' most consistent player. It feels like every game, just over and over and over again, he steps up on both ends of the court. He's not known for being a scorer, like a true number one scoring option. He's not a flashy player, but he's fundamentally solid, really physical, and the enforcer on this team, which in the first half, Boston College was sort of setting the tone and doing what Louisville has done throughout the month of January, is be the enforcer. They were getting second chance points. They were playing tough defense. I won't even say forcing, but it led to Louisville committing a ton of unforced turnovers. More on that coming up in the third segment. But Hadley and his role in making sure that Louisville is the enforcer, it can't be understated. And it doesn't get talked about enough. Like I know that the fan base appreciates Javon. I'm not suggesting that. I just feel like we don't talk about him enough. And he does get talked about frequently, but not in the same light that Chucky Hepburn does and Rain Smith to an extent, and even Terrence Edwards as well. But Javon and his ability to impact the game around the basket when Louisville has lacked that true post presence in the front court, and also be a really good defender that can bang down low with the opposing team's big men, because that's what Georgia Tech did, is they just kept hitting Louisville in the mouth, and the Cardinals just didn't have an answer. Abubakar Traore said in the postgame that, the Cardinals took that personally. And at halftime, they brought up and said, look, we haven't finished games well over the past stretch or so. And they made it a point of emphasis, and he was a huge part in Louisville going on that, 17-2 run in the second half, I think it was, maybe 19-2, that put this game over 20 points in Louisville's favor. And at that point, Boston College really didn't have a chance to come back. So I liked the halftime corrections, and the team just started to impose their will more. They didn't turn the ball over as much, and I won't say it's a blessing in disguise, because there's no blessing with an injury. Chucky Hepburn going down is devastating, and I hope that it's not long-term. Like I said, more on that when we come back in the second segment. But for Louisville to show that, hey, look, I know Chucky went down, but we're still a good team. And to be able to get an offense going and to have the ball flow. It wasn't pretty at times, but to show that it could be done, I think is huge for this team moving forward. So like I said, Louisville eliminating another opportunity to pick up a bad loss. That was kind of weird. Eliminating the possibility of another bad loss, picking up an opportunity to pick up another bad loss just doesn't really sound good. I'm sure some will point out that that's bad grammar or has never been said in the history of existence, but sorry. Like I said, I corrected it myself. So I look at this, and it's sort of in that area to where I'm pleased that the team won by 26, but I also saw what happened in the first half, and I'm like, well, this could have been a blowout much, much sooner. And I'm not going to be too overly critical of the performance, because Louisville did what they needed to do to get back in the win column. But you can kind of talk about things at the same time. I will say, before we get into the next segment, of all the players that Louisville has gone up against this year, he might not necessarily be the best one, but the one that I came away more impressed with than almost anyone was Donald Hand Jr. We knew that he was the go-to option for Boston College. He was 7 of 16 from the field, 19 points, 3 of 8 from the three-point line. He had 5 rebounds. I thought he was just making tough shot after tough shot after tough shot. Like, he can just get to his spot and score in a variety of different ways with a hand in his face, creating his own offense. And even when he's the focal point for another team's defense, he just is able to get his. So credit to him. I thought he had a great game. And Louisville struggled defending him, as everyone pretty much has this season. But Louisville's second half surge without Chucky Hepburn was wild to watch. We'll discuss when we come back on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Looking for tickets to your next big event? Whether it's a concert, comedy show, or sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It gives you the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime all season long to get tickets for the Louisville basketball games and football games. I am using Gametime to get tickets for the Miami game as well, and it's just completely convenient. No surprise fees at checkout. You get a panoramic view from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee means that if you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference. So if you're ready to make your next event even better, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Cardinal fans, want to again take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. In the first part of that second half, right after the media timeout, Louisville was up by single digits, and Chucky Hepburn went up for a layup, and he got blocked. And I don't know if he hyperextended or if he took a knee to the area, but he sustained what was later classified as a lower body injury by the University of Louisville. It looked like a groin injury. I know Mike Rutherford tweeted it out. I had someone who was up in Boston send me an update. Actually is a frequent listener of the show, so appreciate him for reaching out. But his exact wording: "Yo, man, I'm at the game in Boston. Chucky has been he has been in and off the bike, and looks like he has a pretty good wrap on his groin. Looks like he's been telling everyone he's good, but walking pretty gingerly." Now, Pat Kelsey said after the game that he wouldn't have an update until tomorrow, which technically is today, considering this episode is being released at about midnight. So technically an answer will come at some point, hopefully today. And I think it was Kent Taylor tweeted out that Pat Kelsey was told by the medical staff that Chucky was not able to come back in. So I don't know if that was out of precaution with it being a soft tissue situation or what, but definitely not ideal for the Louisville Cardinals. Now, it's really hard to judge body language because you could tell that he was walking gingerly, but he was smiling and laughing with his teammates. He was getting up and down. And I know you can't really classify that as the end all be all in this situation, but I would have to maybe imagine that that's optimistic a little bit. Maybe this was precautionary, but it doesn't make me feel great to hear that the medical staff said he couldn't come back in. Now, I'm not going to act like I'm a doctor. I am someone who surfs WebMD and makes myself a hypochondriac, but that's a story for a different day. It's tough because if Chucky misses extended amount of time, that's devastating news for Louisville. And the only thing that you can hope for is that it is not that serious and it's day to day. Maybe you rest him against Miami. Maybe he plays limited minutes. I just hope that it's one of those situations where he's not missing multiple weeks, because that could be just absolutely catastrophic for this Louisville team that relies so much on their star point guard to win games. Now, one thing that Louisville did when Chucky went down is they went on a huge run and proved that even when Chucky goes down, it's like, look, we can still get the offense flowing. We can still run the score up. And that the Cardinals did. Like I said, I think it was a 17-2 run. And there's a couple players. Now, it took everyone, but there's definitely a couple that I feel like, I'll say 3 in particular that were huge. Number one, Terrence Edwards taking over that point guard role. Couldn't be more encouraged by the way that he played. Now, it wasn't always pretty. It wasn't perfect. He had some situations where he got indecisive, and it led to a bad shot selection. It led to a turnover, and you got to work that out. However, he played his game. Louisville sort of switched up looked like the game plan is like, we're going to pound the ball inside and make you beat us that way. And all 3 players that we're talking about in this segment did just that. Terrence Edwards had some big buckets in the second half that sort of just deterred the momentum. 8 of 15 from the field, 19 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. He did have 4 turnovers, but he made the most out of his opportunity, and the offense showed that it can still flow without Chucky on the court. Javon Hadley, 22 points, like we mentioned, a couple big-time threes. In that second half, Hadley's defense was really solid. He got the ball in the paint multiple times. And that post game that he has, only 6'6", but plays so much larger than his size with that 215-pound frame, and just bullied the Boston College defense. I mean, they just didn't have an answer for Hadley. He'd get the ball in the paint, and they'd clear out, and he would just go to work. And that little jump hook that he has going to the offhand with the left, it was just automatic, it felt like. And 8 for 12 from the field. Like I said, it wasn't the flashiest 22 points, but he's just one of those guys that you watch the game and you look down, you're like, wow, Hadley's got 15 points. And that's just the player that he is. The third player that I felt like stepped up big time, and I think he needs to have an increased role in this offense on an isolation, or in an isolation situation, is Abubakar Traore. He played 15 minutes, but 4 of 4 from the field, had 11 rebounds, 9 points, and 1 steal. Now, he has to do a better job of staying out of foul trouble, although some of those fouls, I was like, I mean, if you're letting them play physical, how do you make that call in that situation? But, Traore's, like I said, we talk about being an enforcer, like Louisville enforcing the physicality, and that's one of the main recipes for their sustained success in ACC play. I think that Javon Hadley and Abubakar Traore hold that foundation up. Traore has a different role. He's more of a spark plug off the bench, and he's able to come in and just completely change the dynamic with his play on both ends. Like I said, 11 rebounds, another player that plays so much larger than his height. And that was needed, considering that Boston College was getting a ton of second chance opportunities in this game, and the Cardinals were able to ultimately out-rebound them by 12. It wasn't that close in the first half. But he had a couple of situations to where you saw the handle. I mean, the spin move, the footwork, he had where he did he did the jab and spinned off to the strong side on his right side and was able to lay it up. And I was like, that's low key kind of filthy the way he did it. I was like, that's nasty. Traore, relax. But it goes back to the point of, I think, especially if Chucky has to miss time, which we don't know, we'll give an update, or we'll discuss the update when we get it on the Friday episode of the show. But in the event that he does have to miss a game or some time, I think that Traore needs to get some more looks on the low block, allowing him to get to the basket and clear it out and let him sort of take his man one-on-one. Now, I know that he's not going to be the lead scoring option or the lead offensive initiator on the court, but I do think that when he gets the ball down around the low block on the baseline, gets the ball in the dunker spot, he's so athletic and so strong that he's able to do the drop step down to the low block, or he's able to have that spin move, and he has a pretty good touch around the rim as well. So it was a matter of everyone. Rain Smith had a couple of big time plays. Noah Waterman hit a shot in that second half. Kenai Roots gave some good minutes off the bench. Really good second half. When we come back, we do have to discuss some of the lingering issues that do need to be cleaned up a little bit. Like I said, Louisville winning this game by 26, so you can't take too much from it. But there are some things that I feel like Louisville does need to get better at moving forward through the month of February. We'll identify what those things are when we come back on this post-game recap edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded, Prize Picks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. Prize Picks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick, and you're cashing out. Check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Once again, that's the code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Card Nation, let me just reiterate something. I'm not trying to be overly critical in a game that Louisville won by 26 points. It could obviously be worse. And when I say things in this segment, know that I mean that it's just something that they just need to improve on. It's nothing more, nothing less. Doesn't have to be a big deal. Don't have to go into the comments saying, do we really need to criticize that much? You can celebrate a win and still discuss where the team needs to get better. That's sort of the point of sports, because if a team didn't need to get better, then I'd either be really encouraged or really discouraged, depending on how the team was playing. But most of the issues were in the first half. So Louisville cleaned up some of those issues in the second half, and it was really nice to see. The first thing that I'll say was the unforced turnovers. Last game, the Cardinals were really sloppy with the ball. The turnovers were just due to bad passes, late passes, bad reads, lack of ball security, dribbling the ball out of bounds, stepping on the baseline, more of the same in the first half in this game. Now, the Cardinals ended up with 11 turnovers. They had 8 in the first half. Boston College as a team coming into Wednesday gave up forced just over 10 turnovers per game. That's really, really bad. Third worst in the ACC. Or one of the bottom in the ACC, like 318th in the country. Not good at all. And I would venture into saying that of the 8 turnovers, maybe one of them was forced. A couple times, players just either missed the read to James Scott and it was a bad pass, or James Scott wasn't ready, one or the other. It just resulted in a turnover. Deflecting the ball out of bounds when you should have clearly retained possession, stepping on the baseline, just things add up. And what it did was it prevented the Cardinals from increasing the lead to over 15 or 20. And why does this matter as much? Well, we just saw against Georgia Tech how if you allow a team to stick around for a good portion of the game, there's a chance that you could be on the losing end, and Louisville was. And maybe it's sort of like that Georgia Tech loss was fresh, and there were some similarities that you could draw eerily similar, those two games in the first half. And it could have been worse. Louisville had a 10-point lead. And I know that it seems like, oh, yeah, okay, things were so bad. Louisville had a 10-point lead. No, I'm not saying that. I mean, but you do have to be critical of how things happen. Like Louisville did have 41 offensive points. That was really good. Imagine what they could have done had they made some shots around the basket that probably should have been made, had they not turned the ball over as much as they did, had they not allowed multiple second chance opportunities in the first half. How many Boston College offensive rebounds? I think Boston College had like 5 offensive rebounds in that first half, and the majority of them resulted in second chance points. Now, again, you can also make the case that the Cardinals 100% cleaned up some of those mistakes in the second half, which they hadn't had a good second half since the SMU game a couple weeks ago. So, tough second half performance against Wake Forest, but you're up by double digits there. It's kind of hard to keep your foot on the gas. Georgia Tech, that second half was really, really bad. I mean, the worst half of basketball that Louisville has played, probably on the defensive end. But I know the level of competition that you played wasn't the greatest, but to see Louisville sort of build that momentum back up on the defensive end, it was encouraging to see. So I think it's just a matter of the lingering issues, not really so much just the Georgia Tech game, but it's sort of the season as a whole. Another thing that I want to see, and maybe others have a different perception of this, and it wasn't like this in the second half, but Louisville sort of got, I won't say bullied in terms of physicality, but Georgia Tech was the more physical team in that game against the Cardinals. It felt like Boston College was sort of enforcing the physicality over Louisville in the first half at times, not the whole half, but definitely at times. And to see Louisville sort of flip that script and say, whoa, you're not going to do this to us. I don't care if you're at home or not. This is the reason why we're a good team, and we're going to show it. So credit to the coaching staff, credit to the team. Issues that I just caught on to. I mean, like I said, don't come at me with too much criticism for discussing what went wrong in this game, even though the team won by 26. I think that you have to have an honest discussion about what went right and what went wrong. But the good news is that a win is a win. You won by 26. You covered the spread pretty easily, doubled the spread, honestly, minus 12.5, and you handle business. And that's what matters. 17-6, 10-2 in conference play. When we come back on tomorrow's episode of the show, we're previewing Saturday's game against Miami. We'll discuss whatever health update we get on Chucky Hepburn and much more. Like I said, when we come back on the Friday edition of the show, everyone have a great day. Celebrate the victory. My guy Brandon Chase getting to have his victory coffee once again. We'll see you right back here Friday. Go Cards.